Okay, like I never did a show where I had to adjust these or something. So I hope this worked. You can hear me okay? All right. It's good to see some familiar faces. So thank you, AEAC and Writer's Block for hosting this. There it used to be cutting edge topic. It's becoming less so now. But I mean, even though we hear a lot about it, oh, thank you so much. The research is still being churned out. So, as we speak today, I just want to, well, let me see, let's just go to the disclaimer slide here that we always have to do. So, psychedelics in general are still federally illegal. So, it's important to remember that in the context of tonight. Don't ask me how to get stuff, if you know where I get stuff, or anything like that. We don't condone any illegal activity or use of illegal substances. However, harm reduction and education is actually a huge goal of the AEAC, and so we really want to put the information out there about the excellent research that's there. It's interesting because I'm so highly qualified in something that's still not federally condoned. I got my first master's at UCSF, was a family nurse practitioner, went back for nurse midwifery another time, got my doctorate. Then went back to Johns Hopkins for my postdoctorate, specifically because of their work at the Center for Psychedelic and Consciousness Research. And there's a lot of great studies being done out there. So I'm going to share a lot of that with you now, not just about mental health, but also about the research that's out there with psychedelics and spirituality as well, which I think is really exciting. But again, we can't be condoning any use of illegal substances. And your questions, if they could please be phrased as such. Okay. All right. So psychedelics, I have my notes here because it's been like a long day. Okay. Let's get some definitions down first here. So the psychedelics are a class of psychoactive substances that produce change in perception, mood, and cognitive processes, and they usually affect all the senses. So some of the things that we classify as psychedelics aren't truly classical psychedelics, like MDMA or ketamine aren't classical psychedelics. But they kind of get clumped in because they do have a very powerful ability to alter our state of consciousness. But what are entheogens? So, whoops, I skipped there. So entheogens are typically of plant origin, but they don't have to be. But they're ingested to produce a non-ordinary state for spiritual purposes. So used a lot in ceremony, and again, with the spiritual intention. So here are examples of some that you may have seen before: psilocybin or magic mushrooms or shrooms, cannabis. I used to sort of underestimate the psychedelic capacity of cannabis, but when I started to get trained in psychedelic assisted therapy with cannabis, that was really interesting. There is psychedelic properties to cannabis, I'm sure many of you know, but they can be quite powerful and potent. And what's nice about cannabis is it's legal in many areas, or at least decriminalized, and it's kind of consensual. Like some people just take one hit and they have a great experience. Other people can want to go a lot deeper. Ayahuasca, 5-MeO-DMT or bufo, that's the toad medicine, LSD, MDMA, ketamine, ibogaine, peyote, ritual tobacco, rapé, can be considered an entheogen. San Pedro, changra, chacruna, these are all different types of medicine. So here are some pictures. So we've got psilocybin there, we've got the peyote buttons, we've got the ayahuasca brew, plants that grow out of the ground. Made such a big deal about them. All right, so local and state regulations rapidly changing. So MDMA has completed finally the phase 3 FDA trials with the MAPS organization that was started by Rick Doblin, and it's set for DEA rescheduling at the end of 2023, but we keep coming against roadblocks. When I was working at Burning Man last year, I work at Zendo, which is the psychedelic emergency tent there. I asked Rick, I was like, so when do I finally get to prescribe this? This is the whole reason I went back to Johns Hopkins, is so I could write this stuff for people with PTSD. And he said, oh, it looks like the end of 2023 still, but it's probably going to take a smidge longer. So some cities have decriminalized, so it's still federally illegal, but some cities have decided to not use their time and resources to prosecute. So like Oakland, Denver, Santa Cruz. Different state marijuana laws is we're well aware of here in Alaska. In general, psilocybin follows cannabis legislation. So that's a positive thing for Alaska in terms of what we've already done with cannabis. Usually psilocybin can follow. And then psilocybin in Oregon has been approved for therapeutic use. I'm licensed in Oregon. I've undergone all of their rigmarole. I still personally think decriminalization is the way to go, but we'll see how this goes. I don't think it's as accessible as they were hoping it would be by passing that, but we'll see. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to really discuss here was the difference between recreational and therapeutic. So a lot of people in this room maybe have had, and I personally have had, recreational experiences. And I want to just comment that it's very different in a therapeutic context. So, when we are looking at a recreational setting, we don't have usually control of our environment. There's a lot of social pressures at play, people watching us, people interfering with our experience, running into police while you're walking down the street or something. And then also the quality and the dose is often an issue. People are mixing substances. Very rarely are people doing psychedelics alone. I think Burning Man's a great example of a place where people mix a lot of stuff, and working at Zendo gives you a lot of experience with seeing why we shouldn't really do that. It's not that helpful. And in the therapeutic setting, we do control for the set and setting. That is a phrase that many people may have heard before, but there's also actually things like the substance that we choose. Not all substances are ideal for all intentions. Like some substances lend themselves more towards existential issues or towards treatment of depression. Some are better for PTSD, for example. So what's the substance that we're using? What's the dose of that substance? Some substances, if underdosed, actually produce anxiety. And if they're overdosed, they can be re-traumatizing. And then also the skill of the guide and the intention setting, the preparatory aspect. So there's a lot involved in the therapeutic context. So some people are really nervous. They're like, I don't know if I want to do that. When I was younger, I had a really bad experience with LSD or with mushrooms. And my experience has been that usually once we enter into a therapeutic situation, we've actually addressed all that by that point, and people tend to do fairly well. And for some people, they're like, well, I've never done it before. That's awesome, actually, because then you're not bringing anything to the table from past experiences with expectations or anything like that. I will say that the one thing I've seen is, with all the shows that are out there, whenever they talk about psychedelics, they show like the kaleidoscope and everything. And it's like, that doesn't usually happen. So, I mean, it can, but some people are like, well, I thought I was going to see stuff and all of this. And that doesn't have to happen to have a therapeutic experience. So with the psychotherapeutic model, we're emphasizing the setting, the music, the interpersonal connection, the relationship between the therapist and the client is of utmost importance to create that safety. I know a lot of people come to me because they feel safer than just doing it on the street or with a stranger or a sitter or something like that. The other important thing is that preparation and integration is built in to the whole thing. A lot of people call me and they're like, hey, will you just sit a trip for me? And I'm like, no, first of all, I'm way overqualified for that. but usually with the preparation, we have many sessions because you have to really get to a place where the person's inner healing wisdom is receptive to the medicine. And then the integration after. We hear a lot about people going on ayahuasca retreats out of the country, psilocybin retreats in Jamaica. They come back, they had a life-changing, amazing experience, but then the question is, has anything changed in your daily life, though? Do you treat your partners differently? Are you quitting that job that is so toxic for you? Are you prioritizing your spirituality and your practice? So the question with integration isn't well, was it an amazing experience? It's so now what? And this is where the work actually is most challenging. The trip's actually the easiest part. It's the integration and having to apply it, have the difficult conversations, make the difficult decisions. And then non-ordinary states of consciousness. So rather than being seen as pathological, we look for it. We want a dose high enough to get to a point where we have a non-ordinary state of consciousness to basically often transcend the ego in some cases for existential questions, but also just from a therapeutic level, like with ketamine, we need a dissociative state to see the clinical benefits. It's not enough just to even give a high dose of ketamine if someone doesn't have a dissociative experience. So here are some of the researched areas: depression, anxiety, PTSD, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, complex PTSD, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, existential anxiety, end of life, autism, and more. You know, before psychedelic research was stopped in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of research with LSD in kids with autism. There was a lot of research with addictions, and now we're seeing also some of these things being shown again as the research has gotten revived. One thing to remember about current research is it was risky to request that research be legalized again. And so part of that was choosing sympathetic populations. So some of the first populations studied were war veterans with PTSD, and then also end of life, people diagnosed with terminal illness. So, you know, that in those populations, it was like, okay, we know we don't have great treatment for those populations. Let's go ahead and give it a go. What's nice is we've also been collecting more data, and now we're also seeing, and I'll go through some of the research with you, you know, that psilocybin can help decrease alcohol abuse. Like, I've had many of my clients tell me, you know, wow, when I did my mushroom journey, it wasn't even my intention, but I just stopped drinking. Like, it wasn't even one of their goals. They just didn't feel like they wanted to do it again. One of the things that I think would be interesting was further research on this, because I know a lot of people in AA, you know, when they talk about sobriety, this becomes a gray area. But if we can have more data about it, it could potentially be more useful for folks. So Johns Hopkins is my alma mater, so that's the research I'll share here. There's so many other talks I could give. This is like a very introductory talk, so come to more of our talks later at the calendar of the AEAC. But so here in 2000, there was regulatory approval to resume psychedelic research. There was a study launching the revival. Guidelines for safety of the research was out there. So then we found out about smokers too, the magic mushrooms helping longtime smokers quit, existential anxiety in people with life-threatening cancer. This is one of my areas of interest in particular, because we look at existential, I'm like, who here doesn't have existential anxiety? Like, why am I here? Is my life useful? Am I doing the best with my life? But the current sympathetic population is people with end of life, but I'm so curious about the potential here with adolescents. I know that's a sensitive topic, but not necessarily children, but like young adults and who don't have a sense of direction. We see such high rates of depression and anxiety, rising rates of suicide in teenagers. And, you know, that's an existential crisis in and of itself. All right, reclassification recommendation for the research. Alcohol abuse, and then they got a big grant for the Center for Psychedelic Research. Thank you, Tim Ferriss. And then, oh yeah, so this is tamping down the brain's ego center. So we walk around with what's turned on is called the default mode network. And the default mode network is kind of our default mode, the way we walk around in day-to-day life. And what's great about psychedelics is, the analogy I like to use is, they can provide us with, let's see if this holds. Oh, shizzle. What happened? Okay. All right. Well, I'll just sit on this. Okay. So if you think about when we're born, it's like our brain is this fresh snow hill, like a sledding hill. And we go through life and we make different decisions, choose different ways of thinking, belief systems and whatnot. And then we go down them, like different ones in a sled. And any of you who sledded here in Alaska know that we make grooves into the snow. And as you've also learned sledding, when you take enough of the same pathway over and over, even if you want to go a different way, you eventually get like funneled back into the same one. We see this a lot in depression, right? And then with PTSD as well, you know, response flexibility is decreased. So our ability to be like, why do I always yell when I don't want to yell? Well, that's decreased response flexibility. I'd like to do something differently, but I can't not do it, right? And so what psychedelics can do by turning off the default mode network is they kind of provide a fresh snowfall. Fill in all of those deep grooves so that you have a better chance at taking a different pathway the next time. So we have increased neuroplasticity, which is amazing. You know, we used to think, well, once your brain's a certain way, that's it. But there's a saying, oh gosh, I think it was Terence McKenna who said, like, psychedelics are wasted on the young. Like, because we get so rigid as we get older and older. And so it's really nice to get that fresh snowfall, different approach. Turning off the default mode network, accessing other parts of our brain. And then major depression improvements. And again, this is mostly with psilocybin. There's lots of research with MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. I've studied with them. And I would like to get actually an expanded access center opened up here in Anchorage. I think this would be a great place for it. But all right, and then a federal grant. Wow, 2021, amazing. So I'm going to be going to a conference in October, getting even more up-to-date info. Then I'll do another one of these, okay? All right, so everybody thinks people are like taking mushrooms, like dancing naked out in the trees. This is not that exciting, okay? This is a ketamine infusion clinic, but this is kind of what the research settings are like for psilocybin as well. So treatment room at the IV infusion clinic, and this is Polaris World, where they also do intramuscular ketamine injected into the deltoid, for example. We usually have on masks, eye masks, and then also headphones. So a lot of people have questions about that. They're like, why the eye mask? You know, I love looking at the colors. Exactly. But this is a therapeutic setting. We're coming here, you know, people with depression, we want the inward journey, which may be uncomfortable, and it's easy to get distracted by the visuals. And we want to encourage that. So, you know, it's funny at Johns Hopkins, the joke is the most common thing the therapists say there is, please put your mask on and lie back down. Or it's like, oh, it's like, okay, no, eye mask on, lie back down. It's really technical, you know, you get all this training. And then, the music, people are like, why the music? It's so distracting. Well, most people that struggle with mental health issues have a story going on in their mind. People that make these psychedelic soundtracks are so gifted. They know the arc of the specific medicine. They know when it's coming on. They know when it's getting intense. They know when you're coming down. And the one, like when you find ones that are really good, they actually help the client through. And we want to encourage, we want provocative music. Some people are like, I don't like this music. It's like, great. So what happens in life when you don't like something, right? This we know is going to be over. So let's just hang with it and be with it. And some people are like, oh, but I love being in nature. I love being in nature. It's like, yes, that's a different thing. There's a difference between exploring your consciousness and getting psychedelic assisted therapy. This is a psilocybin setting here. So we want it to be very home-like. You know, they made mistakes back, you know, in the Timothy Leary days, this like clinical cement basement buildings, people with white coats. So really scary. They kind of learn from that. Now they have nice pictures, cozy setting. So this is the ketamine assisted psychotherapy protocol. I'll use that in this talk because that is one of the ones that is legal for use in all 50 states. It's not a classical psychedelic, it's a dissociative anesthetic. And so there's a screening that takes place to make sure that there aren't any medical contraindications. There's an intake, you know, usually with your classical psychiatric intake. Assessments. So this is something I love because I'm kind of a geek that way, hence all the degrees. But like, you know, getting baseline assessments for depression, but not just depression and anxiety and PTSD. We also can measure self-compassion and how well do you know, work in a group and all of these kinds of things. And then you have a preparatory set of sessions. Usually it's about 3 preparatory sessions. Sometimes the intake is included as one of those. But for the MAPS with MDMA, For psilocybin, there are usually 3. And again, that's because you also want to address any anxieties or blocks people might have to the medicine. Like some people, if they had a bad trip a while ago, you want to talk about that and get through that and make sure that they are ready. Some people aren't ready yet for a psychedelic session. You know, in psychiatry and psychology, we talk about the protectors. You know, we have these protectors in our mind that are so strong. And there are people with really strong protectors, and you give them a lot of psychedelics and nothing's going to happen. It's kind of crazy. It's not just metabolic for some people. And then the integration afterwards. This is a great book. I mean, a movie you can rent for like $4, $5, Trip of Compassion. It's so, I get to see them when I get trained, but for lay people to see an actual MDMA session with a real client is so, in fact, it'd be cool if we could screen this, I wonder. But if you can rent this, I think it's available on Vimeo. It's so amazing. So Israel had lightened up on their regulations before the US. And man, they really need it, right? They have the citizens are required to do 2 years of military service. Lots of studies done in Israel showing the benefit of MDMA before we could even start it here in the US. So Trip of Compassion is pretty amazing. And it goes through, I think, 3 or 4 very specific clients with different traumas, not all military. Some were kidnapping, some were sexual assault, and just showing how with MDMA, just from 3 sessions, 3 medicine sessions, the resolution of many or most or all PTSD symptoms, allowing them to resume their life again. It's pretty powerful. And it's so vulnerable to share this with the world, but they felt so strongly that it changed their lives that they were willing to have this movie made. Okay, there we go. All right, so here are some of the qualities that we see of psychedelics in general. Spaciousness, like this fresh snowfall that I was talking about. I should have worn what you wore, Gina. I'm like so hot. I'm like just wearing a tank top. I should have worn a sweater. So spaciousness of mind, freedom of mind, reduction of verbal thinking. So with the exception of MDMA, most of the time there's not a lot of talking going on for at least the first half. People are just in their thing. And then as they come out, there's more discussion. There's a reduction in negative, obsessive, and self-referential thinking, experience of surrender. This is some of the mystical experiences. We can actually measure these now. And in case you're wondering, we've actually done research with synthetic psilocybin and actual mushroom, and the mystical experience scales are the same with both. So I know that there's some like people super old school, like, no, you have to have the whole plant. But guess what? A lot of people throw up on the whole plant. So it's kind of nice with the synthesized form to avoid a lot of that. You can really get the dose down to very specific dosing, so you know exactly what you're getting, because batch to batch with mushrooms, it can vary. Near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, archetypal experiences. And then, like I was saying, we don't necessarily just want these positive healing experiences. Healing can happen in the challenging experience as well. So we invite those in. So ketamine right now is very accessible. It's legal. What's also nice about it is it doesn't take your whole day or even a half a day. It's like a 2-hour thing, maybe even less for some people. You can titrate the dose up or down. And so for some people that are really hesitant and they're like, oh, if I can handle like 8 hours of something, ketamine can be great. And actually for a lot of people, the most intense part's like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It's also one of the drawbacks. I've heard some clients say, like, I wish I could hang out in that space a little longer. But there's things you can do to help that, like with booster doses and whatnot. All right, so inner healing intelligence. This is so important. So in psychedelic assisted therapy, it's so different than traditional therapy, because in traditional therapy, it's like, well, I'm the expert, and then I'm just going to watch you and help you and guide you heal through your process. With psychedelic assisted therapy, we're trusting the inner healing intelligence of the person. So there's a belief, just like we trust with the body, like, okay, you're going to get a cut. And as long as the set and setting's correct, you don't have an infection, the wound is clean, the wound edges are well approximated, you had an expert look at it, they're like, okay, you don't need stitches. good set and setting, you don't have someone checking in with you every hour, like, okay, don't forget to tell your body to heal. How are you healing? It just happens, right? And the psyche has the potential for this too. So we assume that whatever arises is significant for that person. We can set an intention. You know, I was a midwife for 10 years. I've caught over like 1,000 babies. And I used to tell people with the birth plan, like, we can make a birth plan, but what's going to happen is going to happen, right? So similarly with the medicine, we can make an intention. Like, some people are like, I really want to remember this thing that I think happened when I was 5. And then they're like, why was my trip all about cats? Right? And it's like, okay, well, let's figure it out. And like, I just tell this story because it's so funny. Let me see if she's in here. She's okay with me telling. Okay. But she was like, I'm so annoyed. Everybody else had these like amazing experiences and mine was all about cats. And then I was like, well, what was it like? And she was like, well, at first I was like, well, I'm having this about cats. I hate cats. I hate cats. She goes, but by the end, I totally loved them and they were great. And then she was like, oh, wait. So I like hated something and then just had this process and then I loved it and nothing else changed but my internal experience. And so for her, I mean, okay, and I'm not kidding. Then we were, because then we were like walking around town one day, and then she was like, all these cats were coming up to her, and she's like, what? This like never happened. I'm like, I've never even seen cats here. This is weird. And so anyway, it was just funny because that actually shifted. She realized, oh, it's possible for me to completely take something that for my life I hated, and now I feel completely different, and they are reacting differently towards me. So inner healing wisdom, super important. So challenges and contraindications. Listen, psychedelics are not a panacea. They are not for everybody. They are not for everything. Okay? For some people, a psychedelic experience can be re-traumatizing. No bueno. So it's really important to know that. And it's also important to know what it's good at helping and what it's not good at helping, because we don't want to, just like if someone just gave you some expensive medicine, or like, well, try it, it might help. Like, it's nice to know if it probably will help, right? There's medical contraindications, psychological contraindications. A lot of people that aren't sufficiently prepared, like they'll show up in Peru to do ayahuasca retreat, and no one's really done an in-depth. People are getting better at it, but there's a lot of people who are re-traumatized. Resistance to integration. This is huge. A lot of people are like, I'm good, the journey was great, and then they don't want to follow up with integration. If that's the case, then like, you know, I tell people you're not a great candidate. Not wanting to let go. Some people like their story. There's a secondary benefit to that. Some people think they want to get better, but they don't. So it's important to find that out. Oh, and then also other providers. Like, I think what the AEAC is doing is really networking providers in the area that are supportive. Like, I have a lot of people sent to me for integration because they went off and had their own experience and they don't know what to do with it. And so it's nice to have a network of people that we can support. There's a lot of somatic things that come up with psychedelic assisted therapy. Like, I know somatic experiencing, but there's some people that only do somatic experiencing. So I like to refer people to them. Oh, the other important part of this is, I think, what's your support system like at home? If we think about the traditional uses of psychedelics, the whole community was in on it. You know, the whole grandma was in on it. Grandma had their experience or whatever. And so it's very isolating to have had an experience like that and then maybe go back to a community that you can't talk about it or share about it with other people. So this is what I was alluding to earlier with it's not just set and setting. We talk about screening, is that appropriate? The set and setting, the skill set of the guide, the substance and dosing, and the post-medicine situation or context. You know, the social support, the integration, things like that. Everybody always wants to know about microdosing, so I added in microdosing slides finally. So these are sub-perceptual. So if you're like, oh yeah, it's microdosing, it's kind of cool, the colors were brighter, that's not microdosing. It's sub-perceptual, okay? Non-hallucinogenic. You theoretically should be able to drive, go to work and everything because it's sub-perceptual, okay? Research is lacking in this, but we do know that you know, there's some growing concern with some cardiac histories that maybe those folks shouldn't even be microdosing. So we'll just keep that in mind, and hopefully I'll get an update on that in October. Could it be placebo effect? Maybe, but kind of who cares? Like, is this the power of the mind? If there's no harm, in my opinion, okay, if there's no harm and it works, great. Most of the medications out there have a significant placebo effect, actually, the ones that your insurance is paying for, including blood pressure medications and many others. And so that to me is less, I think it's good to know, but it doesn't necessarily change the plan. So why do some people microdose? It was kind of a thing in the Silicon Valley to help with creativity, decrease stress, boost mood. I've noticed a lot of people coming to me saying that they actually get more anxiety with microdosing. So just keep that in mind. It might not be the best for anxiety. Some people say for social anxiety, it might be a little better. But some people also report some agitation of anxiety. The states of flow, that is a common thing in Silicon Valley when people are trying to problem solve or come up with different programs and whatnot, but also just for any problem solving. And the benefits are said to be cumulative and grow over time. Like Paul Stamets, he's been microdosing for decades, and his protocol includes niacin as well as lion's mane. He looks at it also more from a neurocognitive effect. I think that's one of the great research areas that's going to come out is what is the role of psychedelics with neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's or dementia and things like that too. But so I think that that's a good thing that we could look at in terms of potential research in the future. So the protocol, the Fadiman protocol, is a 3-day cycle, for 4 to 8 weeks, and then the Stamets stacking, like I said, that's with psilocybin, lion's mane, and niacin. And then the Microdosing Institute, they have a website where they actually go through all of these. If you want to just write Microdosing Institute down, they have all these in great detail up there. But instead of every 3 days, they're taking it every other day. So again, low dose is not microdosing. But if we're low dosing, we can often notice a more empathogenic experience. A lot of therapists like with ketamine to do more of this psycholytic experience because you don't want someone that's so far out there that we can't have a therapy session. It's nicer when they're just a bit altered, dissociated enough. Now, by dissociated, I think they're, as it's often been used as a pathological term, but dissociation is really your capacity, it's actually a skill to be able to separate yourself from the situation. So for many of us here that have maybe had trauma, sometimes maybe when we recount the story, we feel like it's happening again. We're like in it, we're visualizing it. But dissociation is like being able to have a bit of distance between, and that's where we can really have good effective therapy, because when you're in it again, that's just re-traumatizing. It feels crappy, it's not helpful. So when we can create this bit of a distance, that's what we're aiming for. So here are the different levels of experience of trips, so to say, trip levels with psilocybin. The microdosing is so tiny. You can see how tiny. If you've microdosed like for decades, like Stamets, it'll be higher than that because you do develop a tolerance over time. But it's so important to take the breaks that are part of the protocols because people develop a natural tolerance. You develop a tolerance within an hour of taking it, which is why some people at Burning Man make the mistake of, I'll take this and then I'll just take more and more and more, and like nothing's happening. It's like, yeah, because you already developed and now you're just going to get sick because now you've just taken so much, right? So usually we're aiming for like a level 5 with the studies because that's the mystical experience. Ego dissolution, sometimes, but not always. But yeah, I would say where we're aiming for with the research is a level 5. With ketamine, we're kind of in the 3 or 4. So at the moderate or higher doses, that's when we're having these out-of-body experiences, the near-death experiences, the transcendental experiences. And you can get there with ketamine. It's just not going to last as long. And some people, they are having these potential side effects like for some people, it's very destabilizing. That's why the preparation sessions are so important to let them know. I guess because I was a midwife for so long, I use birth as a common analogy, but it's like if someone knows it's normal for their body to feel like it's splitting, then it's a little less distressing. Even though it still hurts. Yeah. Okay. All right. Oh, let me just go ahead. So here is where I want to talk about the spirituality and existential anxiety, because I think, some people are like, well, doesn't this detract from spiritual practice, and doesn't this like it's kind of like bypassing it? But psychedelics have been used for a long time, and entheogens, right, for spiritual purposes. In India, 3,500 years ago, in the Rig Veda, they talk about soma, which was this sacred beverage that they would drink. Tricycle Magazine, which is a Buddhist review, 83% of readers of Tricycle said they'd taken psychedelics. I think a lot of people came to Buddhism during the whole psychedelic era back in the 60s and 70s, because it was like explaining what the hell had happened to them when they took it. Roland Griffiths, oh my gosh, so this is a great study in 2018 at Johns Hopkins. So I would love to pull up my notes on this. I'm not sure if it's going to pull up because I don't want to miss anything. But basically what Roland Griffiths found, let me see if it's on the next slide. Yeah, oh good. I'm so good. I love it when I have my own back. Okay, so so this is marked improvement after psilocybin in interpersonal closeness, gratitude, life meaning and purpose, forgiveness, death transcendence, daily spiritual experiences, religious faith and coping. And what he also found was that people that had a mystical experience on psilocybin, they actually practiced their spirituality more. Like they prayed more, they meditated more, whatever it was they were into, it actually helped them. Some people describe psychedelics, it's like this helicopter ride to the top, so you could see, okay, it's going to be worth all the hype, right? So like we still have to do the daily work, you still have to do the daily practice, but at least you got a view that it's going to be worth it. And then this is my favorite part though, and community observer ratings, how people rated them. Because a whole bunch of people are like, I am so much better now. And their partners are like, not so much. And so I remember I was watching this ayahuasca documentary, and this guy came back his like third retreat or something, and he's like, hey babe, like the camera's following him, and he comes home and she's like, how was it? And he's like, it was so amazing. Everything's going to be so different. It's awesome. And then he goes into the other room and she's like I've heard this before. And so, but what's interesting here is with the psilocybin, now remember, this is preparation, medicine, and integration. Then we see that even their partners agree, which is pretty amazing. All right, so integration, why do it? Well, first of all, a safety thing. A lot of different medicines, ketamine in particular, can have like a big sort of dysthymic episode the next day, meaning like your depression might actually get a little worse the next day. You might actually be suicidal the next day. So it's so important to have that support there. Always having a 24-hour follow-up after ketamine, and the MDMA studies, they would do the same thing. Also attachment, like wanting to address, or there is the relationship with the therapist that is so important. So having that ongoing relationship afterward holds that therapeutic container. You want to help people start to also monitor themselves, like starting the goal, unlike some classical psychoanalysis, isn't to be in therapy for 10 years. The goal is, okay, so like how can you start monitoring yourself, have these insights yourself, and how would you manage when you start noticing these things? Debriefing, not always, but sometimes people will have memories of past traumas and whatnot, so it's really important to have a safe container to debrief that in. Some people often question if it's a true memory or if it's a false memory, and that can actually create a lot of anxiety and stress too. Mine, because that's exactly what mine sounds like. That's okay. Resolving, oh yeah, so there's a lot of people that this part is so important, where we're not trying to banish parts of ourselves anymore, like, oh, that part of me, I just want to get rid of it, but really integrating. The research has shown that the specific type of therapy that includes parts work, like internal family systems, can be so helpful with this, because we're integrating all aspects of the person that often is revealed during these psychedelic journeys, that may not have been in people's awareness before. A part is sort of a way to think of it as like, there's some people that would say when we are thinking, that's actually all different parts of us having conversations in our head. I think I should go out with that person. I don't know though. Another little thing. Yeah, what is it? Like those are actually two different parts. The one that's like, I really want to date someone and get laid or whatever. And then the other part that's like, I don't know, you're not ready yet or whatever. And so we have many parts in us. And during psychedelic assisted therapy, we actually can bring out parts that had previously been repressed. So that's why this type of work tends to be also very conducive. All right, so this is kind of a bit redundant, but yeah, we're basically trying to see, okay, you had a great experience, powerful experience. Now you're going to apply it to your real life. And that is going to take learning communication skills, shedding people that maybe are not helpful in your life anymore, calling in new people, lots of different things happening with the integration here. Lots of therapy talk in there. So how are we on time? Okay, good. So in general, what we're looking for is sustained behavior change, sustained change in our lived experience, and decreased unnecessary suffering. I mean, so, the goal isn't, hey, it's all good, we're just happy all the time. It's like that at least we're getting rid of the optional suffering. Life is always going to be hard. We're not trying to have people walk around and just be happy all the time. 50-50, life is hard. And so the goal, though, is to not make it harder than it already is. And then, this is one of my big goals, is this concept of fully healed adults. Like, a lot of time people are stunted emotionally at the age of their trauma or at the age that their substance abuse began and whatnot. And then we have people walking around and then it's like, who's stewarding children in our community? And to be able to have this medicine available so people can heal and start even having more control over their emotional inner lives. Not control in a bad way, but in a place where there's agency and maturity, then we have healthier family systems, healthier communities. So now I'm just going to open it up for questions because I'd planned for about an hour total. So this is Inside AK is my office here, but you can email me because I know that this was very introductory. You can email me at any time at info@verzone.com. Again, keeping your questions in mind, the type of questions you ask. And so, yeah, I'd love to open it up for questions now. This is one of my favorite parts because I know a lot of people, and I can't, give you medical advice here. That's just out of the scope of this particular talk, but feel free to ask away. Yeah, so the question is, what about other drugs though? Don't they have a similar impact? And so I just want to go back to this slide where we talk about, what psychedelics do. Actually, maybe it's more, because I think I'm a visual person, so I think if you read this again. So if you look at these qualities of psychedelics, these are not always present in methamphetamine, for example, or in cocaine or in alcohol. You may get one of these, right? But not all of these together. And so those substances do provide an altered state of consciousness, but they're not the whole package. And so they're not lending to especially ego dissolution or neuroplasticity, helping people gain access to new ways of thinking. And we actually see physiological growth of neurons, new neural connections. Those actually go away with the use of meth and cocaine and things like that. So not all drugs are the same, but there is a very good, oh gosh, what's his name? Carl Hart? What was that? Yeah. And he talks about, psychedelic exceptionalism, which I think is important to think about. And his kind of advocacy is, why are we like cool with psychedelics but not heroin? Oh, it's because white people take psychedelics, right? And, his is more of like a political approach to it. And, his angle is sort of like, hey, we are criminalizing one type, praising another when everybody's just trying to decrease their suffering. So if we could get to the root cause instead of blame some people for choosing what's available to them in their neighborhood to ease their suffering, But okay, there's Burning Man. I mean, can you imagine if people were like, we're gonna have a big party and have a bunch of people do heroin, and like, I mean, it wouldn't even have, like, it would be shut down so fast, right? And so I think it's an important thing to keep in mind that there is stigmatization of other drugs, and I think there is a culture of psychedelic exceptionalism that we need to acknowledge and address. However, in terms of research and helping with healing depression, healing in terms of like remission of symptoms, and with PTSD and some of these other things that we talked about, that's unique to psychedelics. Is that helpful?
So when you mentioned that with the psychedelics, we have like a tolerance, right? Each person have a tolerance. So
No, usually we actually don't dose even based on weight for like mushrooms. We dose based on weight for ketamine and MDMA. Those aren't classical psychedelics. But you would develop a tolerance only if you were taking it regularly. Yeah. Yeah. But in the research, they're spaced 1 month apart. It can often be the same dose.
so then you do all the
So the question is sort of like, what's the success rate? And, the research right now is actually very controlled, like there's a high exclusion criteria list, a long exclusion criteria list, actually, because they want to decrease the confounding variables. So we're not seeing people in the studies that are, on certain medications. We're not seeing people in the studies. There's not a great diversity. A lot of the studies include white women, middle age, actually. That's for whatever reason, that's who's drawn to apply to these studies. They're trying to improve that. And so in terms of the success rate, though, I think it is important that as we are doing more research that we talk about how some people aren't as successful with certain psychedelics. So for example, with MDMA, we do know that people that have taken SSRIs for a long time, we haven't defined what that is yet, but for some people who've taken SSRIs for a long time, which is a class of antidepressants, they may not benefit as much from MDMA therapy. We don't know why. Is it because it's more severe and they've been on it longer, or is it because of some change in the neural synapses or in the receptors that are impacting that? But that's why I'm saying, like, it's not for everybody and it's not for everything. And then, but, we're seeing an 85% remission rate. So some people have some symptoms still, but they can go to work and they're like, I'm good. Like, I still have a little, maybe a nightmare here and there or whatever, but I can live my life again. Like, if you watch Trip of Compassion, it's really powerful. He's like, there's one man that was sexually abused by his father. He wouldn't even hold his children, because he was afraid that would happen within his relationship. And he was like, I'm able to be with my kids. I cuddle them, I hold them. It's so amazing. And, he's not 100% there, but he's like talking, giving lectures, like happy. So 85% remission rate's pretty good. We have to keep in mind that those are really controlled populations, though, in terms of who's coming in or not. Yes.
And it is like a good starter dose relation.
Yeah, well, I can't give advice on what to take, but I can tell you what the Johns Hopkins uses in their research studies. So the dose that's generally used in the research that is shown to be effective is 35 milligrams of pure psilocybin or 3.5 grams of psilocybin cubensis. Now you have to keep in mind there are so many different kinds of mushrooms. If you took 3.5 of something that's not psilocybin cubensis, you could be like, gone. So it's important to note that what the research has been studying is psilocybin cubensis and then synthesized psilocybin. Now, I know that some research has been done at like 2.5 grams of dried mushrooms. It's just not, it's kind of not in this. So if you look here, this is available online if you just are searching. But so like I was saying in the research, this is like a level 5 that's where we're looking for the mystical experiences that have shown clinical benefit. But at these lower doses, you're still feeling some stuff, just not as strong. So like most people that go to a concert aren't on like a level 6 or level 5. Yeah.
Are there some who like suicide?
Yes. It's a great question. Are there some people for whom psilocybin does not affect them? Yeah, and we don't know why or what's going on. You know, for some of the people, it's psychological, like I was saying, they can have a big block. But some people, they just either they're not breaking down the cellulose to access the active ingredients, so to say, within the cell walls, or they're just not susceptible to it. So it's interesting. But that does not mean necessarily that they wouldn't be susceptible to MDMA or something like that. You know, some people are like, well, did I just get a bunk batch or what? And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of bunk batches out there. That's why I'm really excited, even though, you know, I think there's a lot of growers out there and it's an art. Like as a clinician, I'm going to be very excited when I know exactly what my client's getting. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
People, what support is out there that people are partly with?
What support is there out there for people who what?
Who are going through that want to use it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of underground guides out there.
Well, no, I mean, this is just a partner.
Consult.
Support for their partners who focus someone.
Oh,
So they get the most out of it.
like if you're the partner of someone who's undergoing this process. Oh, okay. Wow, what a cool question. Yeah. So are you talking about trip sitting or are you talking about, okay.
That's for somebody else, just for their home environment.
Oh, I think that's such a great question. Thank you for asking. Yeah. So one is, once they come home, don't be like, so what was it like? Tell me all about it, right? Like, it's always good, just like people are going to share. This can take days to process. There's a lot of things simmering under the surface. I would say, like, no pressure. People are going to share what they want, because if we start asking questions that are leading people, like, what if someone had like a bad image of someone who is asking them questions and they don't want to share it, right? It doesn't mean that they think badly of you. It could just mean something totally different in the therapeutic process, but to share it in that context can be high pressure for that person and uncomfortable and lead to more problems when it doesn't need to. So I would say, you know, I always tell people, you know, if you're going to do this that day, make sure you don't have anything going on after. It should be really mellow at home. You're not like watching like violent movies or scary movies or something. Really chill environment, nice music, maybe even in nature, like go to a cabin or something. The next day, a lot of people are fine the next day, but a lot of people are a little bit hungover almost, like they're just really tired. So just kind of lower expectations that day. But I would say, you know, an environment of like, hey, like whatever happened, it's your experience. I'm not going to judge it. Like, you work with your therapist on it. I'm here to support you. And doing our own work as partners to not take things personally that come up. Does that kind of answer your question? Yeah. And they might be a little depressed after the next day. So I think, you know, if you're noticing unusual behavior like suicidal thoughts or ideation, or they're really withdrawn or agitated, to let their therapist know, because sometimes it's the partner that notices that more so than the person.
Sort of the same with ketamine.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, it is the same with ketamine.
You love shut.
I know. Isn't that great? If we all just kept our mouths shut, relationships would be so much better. Yes. It's only available in research settings right now. Like, you can't even get it on the street. I mean, I feel like I would have seen it at Burning Man now if that was happening. But so, sorry. Oh, this is being recorded. Sorry, people in the recording. Yeah, so right now it's only available And that's one of the reasons why psilocybin research took so long is like, even as a synthetic, it's hard to patent because it's not, you can't adulterate it. So molecularly, it's found in nature. So they're going to have to patent either the delivery system or something like that. Yeah.
That's because you mentioned it. Is it analogous to like a tincture? Do people make tinctures out of this?
People do sell tinctures of like mescaline, peyote, and psilocybin, but I would say it's more common like people take it in tea. Yeah. Yeah, but the synthetic in the research is powdered and it's in a pill, in a capsule.
One go.
Yes. And
Yep. You mentioned your midwife history. You mentioned immunity program to youngins. I don't know why this question is up, but you ask here. You also mentioned about middle-aged women. Is being pregnant a contraindication? Is a contraindication for psilocybin specifically?
so one of the things I learned as a midwife is everybody's basically like everything's contraindicated, like even herbal teas. And it was really frustrating because no one was willing to say like, actually, yeah, it's okay. However, with psychedelics, like we don't know. And in medicine, basically, if we don't have research that shows it's safe, then it's not recommended. I will say that, don't quote me on this, and I'll find out more in October. But I do think that there has been, because MAPS is collecting real world data in certain settings. And we know there's lots of postpartum moms out there with depression that have used psilocybin and whatnot and no untoward effects. But during pregnancy, not recommended. Yeah. Oh, wait, there's. Yeah.
Ajax. Question about ketamine.
That's what
This whether it's OCD or depression, weeks the same. That's
Exactly. The dosing differences would be if you're going to get ketamine for pain, that's going to be at a much higher dose. You're usually kind of out during that IV infusion. And so, yeah, it's not a matter of the diagnosis. And some condition like severe OCD sometimes isn't that helpful. Like the really rigid OCD doesn't benefit that much from ketamine because it's so rigid. It's like they need something a bit stronger sometimes.
that is so. What is with that thing to do with action? Maybe you gotta do. It's
Usually it has to do with the GABA system. Yeah. Like there's a lot of neurochemistry in there, but that's the basics. Yeah. I mean, obviously in serotonin as well, but that's what makes it work. Yeah.
First, when you kind of mentioned in past our slides about trying to get like remote access clinic, the job happens started up here.
I was thinking through MAPS because for the MDMA, because MAPS has expanded access clinics where we have the right to use it for compassionate use. We have to undergo certain, requirements, but I think that Alaska would be a great place for that. We have so many vets and so much PTSD and, challenging to get resources otherwise. But yeah, like Richard Huddlesey's like, do the paperwork. I think it'd be great. It's just like, yeah, okay. Got my kid. Yeah, it takes a lot to do that. But yeah.
And then the second question is, where do you see like a nurse's role in not necessarily an NP role, but
Yeah, in Colorado, I did some training in Colorado, and the nurses there administer the ketamine. They'll well, let me ask this: like, are you wondering like how involved an RN could get in this type of treatment model? Like
Yeah,
what? Yeah, I would say. I would say there's a lot of role for the nurse with preparatory sessions, like in terms of education about side effects and things like that. And then also during the session, like with ketamine, often what will happen is the therapist will be there for the first 45 minutes when it's most intense and then leave, and then the nurse can be there and then help process, especially if there's a psych nurse like that has experience with those things. I think that that could be really powerful. Like I would be stoked to have someone in a clinic who could do that. And then you could go, the therapist could go to the next patient if needed. But yeah, then, so, and then with the IVs, the nurses are usually monitoring, you know, those drips in the clinic or giving it intramuscularly. And then doing follow-up calls the next day, like, how's it going? Do you have any of these depressive symptoms? And making sure that things are going okay.
You see that kind of expanding out to other psychedelics once hopefully they all become.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm really excited about and love is group. Wouldn't work so great with MDMA because everybody's so chatty. Like, is it my turn yet? But it's hard enough with couples. Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to say. I think MDMA therapy with couples is going to be game changing because we're like, it's an empathogen, right? And what do we always complain about? You don't understand me. You don't understand what I say. It's pretty amazing. So I'm really excited about that. The prospect of that becoming federally legal is still really, it's hard enough to get it for veterans with PTSD and things like that. But I just think, I hope that that changes sooner because I think so many families could be healed and have so much more potential that way. But so in group settings, I think an RN could be awesome. Like there's studies now with, like, I've always been a proponent of group sessions with psilocybin when appropriately screened and for appropriate clients. Not everyone's appropriate for a group setting, but it, you know, if we think about these community settings, there's something to be said about being witnessed in your healing. You know, Peter Levine said, trauma isn't what happens to us, it's what happens inside of us in the absence of an empathetic witness. So I'll say that again, trauma isn't what happens to us, it's what happens inside of us in the absence of an empathetic witness. And what I've seen in my own practice is it's the same with healing. Like when we're seen and witnessed in our healing, it's so much more powerful and it can happen exponentially in a group context. So I think we're going to have to do groups because the model right now is not financially sustainable. 2 therapists, 1 client, like, and that's never going to happen. You can't even get 1 therapist covered for most patients. And so I think we're going to move to that. And I think the RNs will be awesome for that because we're going to need more facilitators in the room for people that need specific attention. Some people just need their hand held and, you know, or just like a bit of somatic release or something. And an RN absolutely can get training in some somatic techniques for sure. So the question is from the hand therapist that, like, is there research about physical stuff? So I will say that Paul Stamets' wife is a physician in Canada, and she's actually collecting a database on a whole bunch of fascinating things like spontaneous remissions of chronic illnesses, autoimmune diseases, cancers, really fascinating database. Super excited to see where that goes. So not yet, but anecdotally, I will tell you that a lot of people report relief of pain, especially like neurogenic pain. I've worked helping integration with like paraplegics that have had psychedelic experience. Like, I used to wake up with this pain all the time and now it's resolved. So it wasn't even an expected thing to go into. And, you know, that's the shame is we lost decades of research. Like we could have had that answer already, but it's okay. It's okay. Kind of coming up down. Yeah. There's someone. Yeah. Okay.
This is moving.
What?
This is moving more than like the policy legal realm. Oregon's on board now. They looked at their clinics last week. Washington is behind them in terms of researching and setting up their license and all that. What do you see happening?
Yeah, so I think the AEAC is doing really great work. So thank you, Gina, and everybody else for spearheading that. Right now, you know, we have to be really patient, unfortunately. You know, like I was saying, the encouraging thing is for most states, it follows the cannabis legislation. So a lot of the attorneys that are hired for psilocybin legislation helped all the states with their cannabis legislation. So I think we can expect that and we hope for that, knock on wood, but you know, as to how quickly we can't say. But that is the hope. But first we have to get people to believe that this is helpful and more helpful than harmful, right? And so one of the things that I like to encourage people to do is if you've had a positive experience, talk about it. You know, like more people have to know, like normal people do this. It's not just naked people on the playa and Burning Man who are totally normal too, but like in their own way. But it's like you know, I mean, I have so many clients that, you know, I think, wow, like if the community like could know that so many of these folks were benefiting. So, you know, I'd say it can start at a really grassroots level, that if you've had a positive experience, to just share it and tell people about it, because you can't get in trouble for something you did back then. Yeah. There was someone over here. Was there someone over? Just want to make sure. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, my question is like, so how do people get referred to you? You know, let's say that I know.
Oh, I will say this. If someone ever calls me and is like, can I do a psychedelic trip with you? The answer will be no, because it's illegal. So that it will like never happen. But people can like go explore the website and reach out in a different way and ask about harm reduction and things like that. And then I can talk to you about that. Yeah.
Okay, so, and is that covered by insurance every way or no?
No, because it's illegal. Yeah. Ketamine. You're talking about ketamine? Ketamine is covered by insurance, but not all insurance, and not very well. So some people, and mostly very severely depressed patients of mine, can get ketamine covered. Medicaid's starting to cover it, and they're always the first to do that. And so, you know, what most of my clients have had to do though is we'll just bill for a therapy session, an extended therapy session. So you're not going to get reimbursed the whole amount for your ketamine session because it's not covered, but you'll at least get reimbursed for the therapy portion of it. Yeah.
What is the age group?
Adults.
Just adult.
Yeah.
18?
Yeah.
I'm just serious stuff. It's the right to try, because when you're dying or, you know, you have a right to try certain drugs. Is ketamine or any of the psilocybins or any evidence ever, I think
Right now you have to apply for the study, but hopefully that'll change because the research has been really promising. So hopefully we can advocate for that. Absolutely. Compassionate use is another term for that. Is there, okay, yes, sir? Oh yeah, so what's the study? I think it's called clinicaltrials.gov. Clinicaltrials.gov. And then if you go to the MAPS website, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, it's a very long word, but if you go to their site, they also have research studies. That's for MDMA. And so they have clinical trials going for that. But clinicaltrials.gov will also have like the Johns Hopkins psilocybin trials and things like that. Probably take one more if there is. Is there any allowed? Yes.
The ketamine, you got a slide about, you know, meet people, talk to them. And their screening was very big. I shouldn't remember, like, when would you find it useful? Like, if somebody, like, an offer.
Yeah, like, so are you wondering, like, in terms of, clearly I don't know the order of my slides. I'm trying to find that one that they're talking about. There, that one?
Yeah, something to like on the yeah, just for
So ketamine is only approved for treatment-resistant depression.
so if you're not like aware, like we were pressing on something.
Yeah, no. So it's not, it doesn't mean that like you necessarily, it wouldn't be covered by insurance, and it would be, and it's still off-label use. I mean, people use stuff off-label all the time. Like when I was a midwife and we did inductions in labor with Psychotherapeutic, like that was off-label use of Psychotherapeutic. So, I mean, there's off-label use all the time. It's just only approved for treatment-resistant depression. Yeah, but all of those, like, you know, the other things that I had on there in terms of these researched areas, like we've seen benefits in those with ketamine. You should, technically you should have tried at least 2 medications. Mhm. And most people are treatment resistant because they suck. Yeah.
Well, that explains why I think fun.
Now you know. Maybe you should. Oh, yeah, yeah. Maybe, yeah. Uh-huh. But now you know. There. Okay. Well, thank you so much.